Hello and welcome back to another Blurbal Reasoning. Today we are talking about the short story The Calling by Christie for the upcoming War Within expansion for World of Warcraft. I'm just gonna straight up say it right out of the gate. This is my favorite short story they've ever done for WoW. This might be my favorite story of any kind they've ever done for WoW in terms of like external media and stuff. I cried multiple times and I am here to explain to you why. Because I have a feeling that a lot of people are going to read this short story and be like, oh, that was pretty cool. Pretty cool to see, this middle chapter between the end of Shadowlands and the opening cinematic for the War Within. Pretty cool to see how Anduin got from, where he was at the end of Shadowlands to, where we see him at the start of War Within with that intro cinematic is very... you could say it's A to B, but it feels like this middle chapter is really important and it works really well. But I feel like a lot of people wouldn't have had as emotional a response as I did. And I just want to say this straight up. This is clearly a story about a man who has PTSD. I don't have PTSD. I can't relate to it on that level, and I'm not going to pretend like I can even start to guess what people with PTSD would take away from this. But a large part of Anduin's PTSD manifests itself in anxiety. In the form of anxiety, I guess I should say, and I'm someone who has generalized anxiety disorder, and I'm literally in therapy right now for it. And, I don't need to overshare, I don't need to tell you every detail of my life or whatever, but the way Christie writes the hardships he has in terms of, in specific, avoiding putting himself in scenarios where he could fail or he could be met with... a potential, continuation of previous failures. My favourite example being when Roderick dies, and he wants to heal Roderick, he wants to pray to the light to heal Roderick, but he cannot bring himself to do it because he's worried that the light won't answer his call. That is my absolute favourite flourish of this short story. It's not that he calls on the light and the light does not answer. That's Arthas's story, right? It is that he cannot bring himself to attempt to call on the light in case it does not answer, and what that would mean to him. I fundamentally can relate, not in terms of trying to wield a source of magic, but in terms of not being able to get yourself to attempt a thing for fear of failing and for fear of the repercussions of that failure and what that might say about you. And I guess the other half of this is just that out of all of the characters in World of Warcraft, Anduin means a lot to me, personally. As much as any character in fiction can mean something to someone. Everyone has their favourites, and I've heard a lot of criticism about Anduin during the years leading up to BFA, I suppose, and Shadowlands onwards, of, he's just kind of like this one-note Boy Scout who wants to do good in the world. But I've always read him as a little bit more complex than that, of this person who has grown up in this world of constant war and violence and wants to... not just solve it or fix it, but kind of have the courage to stand up and believe in peace and all this stuff. And yeah, like I say, it does sound a little one-note and Boy Scouty, but I don't know, something about the way he's written. I kind of feel the same way about Anduin that I feel about Naruto. It's not that this character hasn't known the difficulties and is therefore naive to them when trying to press for peace. It's... that this character has known the difficulties and is taking the difficult route in pushing for a world of kindness and peace. It's the opposite of that in my eyes. And so I've always been very curious to see how someone in a position of monarchical leadership as well would do that when faced with the realities of global conflict and the need to defend one's people and so on and so forth. And for the most part, I think they've done a good job with Anduin. I wasn't thrilled with his story in Shadowlands, with him becoming, enthralled, because, it's kind of the opposite of why Arthas is such a great character. But I think they're twisting it into a really cool inverse of Arthas, in that instead of him... leading into this dark character, it's more like the stuff that he went through and how that affects him going forwards, and how the Anduin of the past can reconcile with the Anduin of now, who has been through this highly traumatic sequence of events, which, you know, may not have been presented that way in game, but if we're going to look at Anduin as a character, it's one of the things I love with these short stories and these novels, is that they do take the events that happen in game that kind of like happen on, I don't want to say a superficial level, but more of like a plot-driven level, and then take the minute to stop and go, and how would that affect the character? And I think what Christie Golden does here is nothing short of absolute mastery. As usual, she's pretty good at this stuff. And to see this fundamentally kind soul dealing with these feelings of not being good enough and hurting the people around him, and the feelings of shame that come with being too afraid to face the things that he's afraid of, it just really hit me in some places. And I love the fact that Christie Golden does have him fail on multiple occasions. He fails to confide in Roderick, he fails to save Roderick's life. In more subtle ways, he fails at hiding his pain, he fails at taking part in conversation, in socializing on a basic level. And by the end of the story, he's not magically solved. He gets kind of called away to this great destiny, and he works through some stuff for sure, but it's not like he's suddenly wielding the light and healing people or whatever. I just really hope that Anduin's story throughout The War Within and future expansions kind of like continues this quality. I know that might be difficult, especially since Christie Golden is unfortunately no longer with Blizzard, but I know that Anduin is not exactly a character that she invented by herself, and that there's a team of people kind of like working on the stories of all of these characters, and I would hope that, you know, while I would absolutely love for more Christie Golden written Anduin in the future, and hopefully that will happen, I also hope that there are other people in the team who also get the right, you know, parts of what makes Anduin a good character. I love Fox, because he represents Anduin's kindness that Anduin doesn't really see in himself anymore. Like, Roderick advises that he should trap the fox and kill it so that it doesn't go after the chickens, but Anduin knows this creature better than that, and he ends up kind of like taming it, or maybe not taming it, but kind of like becoming friends with it over the course of a story. And in the final moments of a story where he has to part with Fox, oh my god, that was absolutely gut-wrenching. I cried several times through this story for several reasons, and that was one of them. I love that little note as well of like, he didn't want to give the fox a name, but then of course he realizes by the end that he has named the fox Fox. Just like half the hunter player base in World of Warcraft who never end up naming their hunter pets, so they're just running around with cat. But seeing Anduin kind of get to know Roderick's family after Roderick dies as well, and how helping the family deal with their grief surrounding Roderick also helps Anduin heal from his past wounds as well. I don't want to go and look up any discussion around this story, because if people are complaining like that, this one thing, you know, there was a lore mistake here, or I don't understand why they're wasting time with what's Anduin doing in Stormsong Valley, that's not relevant to the story, like, I'm gonna be like, come on guys. I also really love that it did take place in Stormsong Valley, by the way, because it is such a serene and peaceful place. You could imagine someone like Anduin going there, seeking quiet, seeking a simple life. Fuck man, I just want to give the boy a hug. I also love a touch where Ben sees Anduin's sword and basically realizes who he is. And I also love a touch of like his mum being like, now, don't pester him. And like you get the impression that maybe she already kind of knew, and maybe Roderick had already like speculated with her, like, I think, you know, I've seen the king before when I was a kid, you know, maybe this, you know, all that stuff. It's up for interpretation for sure, but I like to think so. The idea, of course, then being that Roderick's kindness towards Jarek is like, you know, it continues. It doesn't matter what Jarek's past is. It doesn't matter who he is or what he might be responsible for. What matters is who he is now and what he's dealing with now. I feel like I need to analyze this further, but I don't know if there's anything else to say, really. I just want to reread it and go cry some more. I'll have you know, I had to pause several times in the recording of this video as well. I will just end on this one thing. There's something that I try to put into words sometimes that I find very difficult to, and I think Christie Golden, you ever have that moment where you're reading something and you just go, yes, those combination of words says exactly what I wanted to be able to say myself. Christie Golden wrote those in Roderick's letter to Anduin, which in retrospect I should have seen as a massive red flag for the character when he said he was going to do that, but it also made sense that he would do that, given I love that little scene between Roderick and Anduin where Anduin's going to apologize for running away from the conversation Roderick wants to have about the war. And, you know, the whole dichotomy between them of Anduin feeling responsible for the war in the first place, but not wanting to give that away because of his hidden identity, and it would interfere with his second hidden life that he's trying to establish here. And I love when Roderick's like, no, it's my fault, clearly, like... I wasn't subtle, so I've written it in a letter and you can just read it whenever you like. You know, I took that at face value, but that's a pretty big red flag. Oh, actually, that is one thing I'm expecting to read. What was up with the bandits? How come they never addressed the bandits when obviously that's not really what the story focus is about? Still, that is another fun reminder that the world of Warcraft is a really horrible place to live in. Anyway, sorry, I said I was going to finish off with some words, wasn't I? So, one of the things that Roderick writes to Anduin is this. And when the darkness grabs you and you feel like you'll never ever be free of it, know you have a chance and a choice every single day to look it in the eye and call it a liar. Some days you can't make that choice, but another day, maybe you can. Thank you, Christie Gordon.